From Spartacus in 73 BC all the way to more modern uprisings, both successful and not, these stories changed the course of history, and it's time we talk about them. What's up, Bumblebees? Let's dive right into the top 10 most shocking slave revolts in history. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Spartacus and the Third Servile War. To start this list off, we have to go back to one of the largest slave revolts in history. Spartacus was a Thracian gladiator who commanded a massive slave army during the Third Servile War. The uprising began in 73 BC when Spartacus, along with a small group of slaves, escaped from gladiator training. As they moved, they gained momentum, with other enslaved people from across the Roman countryside coming to join them in their revolt. Of course, wind ended up getting back to the Roman Senate, and they were rightfully concerned considering how this revolt had defeated not only a militia at Mount Vesuvius, but also two other legions near Mount Garganus. It is said that while this revolt gained massive numbers, the slaves later fell victim to disunion. The group ended up splitting off into several smaller groups, everything was disorganized, and this ultimately led to their demise. The main rebellion was defeated in 71 BC after Marcus Licinius Crassus, commanding 8 Roman legions, cornered Spartacus and defeated what remained of his army. Spartacus lost his life in this battle, and the remaining 6,000 slaves met their fate as they were crucified along a Roman highway as a warning against future revolts. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Andrew Rebellion. This is one of the largest revolts in United States history, and it started on January 8, 1811, when a man named Charles Deslandes led an organized rebellion of enslaved people. He traveled through the German coast of the Mississippi River, which was a region along the west bank of the Mississippi River that was primarily settled by German immigrants, and as he traveled, his group grew to somewhere around an estimated 200 revolters. Within 2 days, however, countergroups began to form and began attacking. They targeted enslaved men at the Destrehan plantation and killed an estimated 40 people who were seeking freedom. Some of the others were captured and later executed, which has led researchers to believe that somewhere around a total of 95 people who were seeking their freedom were killed by these countergroups during this revolt, and of course some of this was done in a public way so as to discourage others from attempting the same sort of thing. As for the leader of the revolt, Charles, well, he was never tried or put in jail. Instead, one of those against him described the extremely grim fate that he had met at the hands of those trying to oppose him. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Stono Rebellion. On September 9th, 1739, a group of 20 enslaved people met near the Stono River in South Carolina. This rebellion had been planned for this day, and to start off with, the group stopped at a firearm depot where they took the life of the owner and armed themselves for what was to come. They marched from here, headed to Florida with a sign that said Liberty. The exact details of this entire revolt are quite murky in the history books because of the fact that there was only ever one first-hand account, so it isn't quite clear who was leading this group. Some say it was a man named Cato, others say a man named Jemmy. The group continued on their journey, and as they went, they took the lives of enslavers and burned their homes. Within 10 miles, however, the group was found by a white militia group. Those searching for freedom were decapitated in front of other enslaved people, which was meant to serve as a warning. In the end, it has been recorded that 21 white people and 44 black people were killed during the Stono Rebellion. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Jij Rebellion. By the time the 19th century rolled around, slavery was a large part of the economy in Cape Colony, which was a region of South Africa under British rule that was quickly developing. Among the enslaved populations in this area, there were several uprising attempts, but the largest and most famous, and really one of the first organized revolts in the colony, came in 1808, and it is referred to as the Jij Rebellion. Basically, there were about 340 slaves, mainly from grain farms, that came together, and while their efforts were largely non-violent, they took over farms, imprisoned the owners, and freed the slaves. They aimed to march on Cape Town, and they were successful, but only for a while. Within 36 hours, all of the main leaders of the revolt were either sentenced to death or imprisoned, which led to the revolt sort of breaking down. While they didn't achieve their larger goals, this uprising did go on to strengthen the voices across Cape Colony that were beginning to speak up and out, and this eventually led to the abolition of slavery in the 1830s. In our number 6 spot today, we have Gaspar Yanga's Rebellion. Often referred to as the quote first liberator of the Americas, Gaspar Yanga was a slave who went on to spend 4 decades establishing a free settlement in Mexico. This story starts off in 1570 when there was a staged revolt at a sugarcane plant near Veracruz. Gaspar and a small group fled into the forest and began to establish their own colony. They would go on to spend the next 40 years hiding in this outlaw community, and they survived by farming and also the occasional raid on Spanish supply convoys. In 1609, colonial authorities did succeed in destroying their settlement, but they failed to capture Gaspar or his followers. As 40 years had passed, Gaspar was now in his old age, and he negotiated his right to build his own colony as long as he paid taxes to the Spanish crown. I mean, that seems like a pretty fair negotiation to me. This municipality, which was the first official settlement of freed Africans in the Americas, was fully established in 1630, and it still exists today. It is called Yanga. In our number 5 spot today, we have Nat Turner's Rebellion. This remains one of the most famous slave revolts in American history, and it happened in 1831. This uprising, led by Nat Turner, occurred in Southampton County, Virginia, and it began when Nat, who was a deeply religious person, planned it after having experienced prophetic visions which ordered him to gain his freedom using force. On August 21st, 1831, Nat and a group killed the family of those who enslaved them, and from there a group of about 70 moved from house to house, taking lives as they went. It took a militia to take down this group, but it did happen when Nat and 55 others were captured and sentenced to death by the state. This rebellion is said to have had a ripple effect that created hysteria among white people and slave owners. Somewhere around an estimated 200 slaves were eventually killed by white mobs. This is obviously horrific enough, but this is not where it ended. Nat Turner was regarded as quite an intelligent man, and this was cited as a major factor in his revolt, and of course enslavers wanted to try and ensure it never happened again. This meant that many states later went on to pass laws which made it illegal to teach black people how to read or write. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Haitian Revolution. Widely regarded as the most successful slave rebellion in history, this revolution began as a revolt, but ended with the founding of an independent state. In 1791, the main part of the uprising began in the French colony of Saint-Domingue, and it was inspired by the egalitarian philosophy of the French Revolution. Those revolting organized their plans and ended up killing people, burning sugar plantations, all in the pursuit and journey of taking control of the northern regions of Saint-Domingue. This would last for years until February of 1794, when the government abolished slavery in all of its territories. In 1801, famed rebel general Toussaint Louverture joined forces with the French Republicans, and in this year he had established himself as the governor of the island. This all changed again, however, in 1802 when Napoleon Bonaparte's imperial forces captured the general and attempted to reinstate slavery. The former slaves were not having this, and they quickly took up arms. Led by Jean-Jacques Dessalines in 1803, they defeated the French forces at the Battle of Vertières. The year after this, the former slaves declared their independence and they established the island as the new Republic of Haiti. The success of this story quickly spread and went on to inspire others to revolt throughout the United States and the Caribbean. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Zanj Rebellion. This uprising began in 869 AD when Zanj slaves joined with a revolutionary in order to rise up against the Abbasid Caliphate. Zanj is an Arabic term that was used at the time to describe East Africans, and this uprising was started by all the false promises of land and freedom. And to start, they began by raiding nearby cities at night to gather supplies and also to liberate others in the same position. They started small, but the numbers grew quickly, and this turned into a revolution that lasted for 15 years. It turned into more than just a revolt against slavery. It turned into a battle of rich against poor. They even gathered a navy and began to control cities in what is now modern-day Iraq. The revolution ended in the 880s after the empire's army mobilized and conquered the rebel city. While many lost their lives in battle, there also were many whose lives were spared, and some were apparently even invited to join the empire's military. In our number 2 spot today, we have the 1733 St. John Insurrection. In 1733, on the Danish-owned island of St. John, most of the slaves there were part of the Akan, which is an African people from what is now modern-day Ghana. In November of 1733, as they were plagued with illness and drought and all of the other horrors that come with being enslaved, a group of higher-ranking Akans began their rebellion plans. Things officially began when the group of slaves used weapons that they had smuggled to kill several of the Danish soldiers that sat inside of a plantation called Coral Bay. After this, another 150 people joined the revolution and did similar things at the island's other plantations, which led to them taking command of most of the island. They then planned to claim the island and all of the valuable farmland, but this didn't last for very long. After 6 months of rule in May of 1734, hundreds of French troops arrived to the island and violently ended the rebellion. After this, it wasn't until over a century later that slavery was abolished in the Danish West Indies. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Baptist War. This revolt started as a peaceful protest, but it ended in a bloody battle. On Christmas Day in 1831, somewhere around 60,000 of the 300,000 enslaved people in Jamaica went on a general strike. Inspired by the abolitionist movement in Great Britain and under the direction of Baptist preacher and slave Samuel Sharp, they vowed not to return to their jobs unless awarded their basic freedoms and a living wage. This peaceful strike carried on until rumors spread that British colonists planned to stop the strike by force. Of course, this is what led to the strike turning into a rebellion. The slaves burned and looted plantations for days, but the loss of life was great. By the time the British colonial army was put into action and they stopped the revolt, 300 slaves and 14 enslavers had been killed. This was not the end of the loss of life, however, as after this, 300 more slaves, including Sam Sharp, were killed due to their involvement. While this may seem as though it was an unsuccessful revolt, the effects were felt far and wide. Only 1 year later, the British Parliament would abolish slavery in the British Empire. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I will see you again soon. Bye!